Welcome to the Cofield Aviation YouTube live stream. For all those individuals listening live, or if you're listening to this afterwards through the archives, thank you for taking the time out of your busy lives to invest in your own personal education. My goal is to conduct this bi-weekly YouTube live stream every other Monday evening at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. This will continue every 2 weeks at the same day and time to the best of my ability. Life and work sometimes may get in the way, but I will absolutely give it my best. The purpose of this live stream is to talk about user-generated topics and questions. So please comment throughout the live if you have any topics or specific questions you'd like addressed, and I will do my best to include them in the current or future broadcast. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. My main reason for doing this is to help supplement training for current flight school students. However, I will cover topics that go above and beyond that at times, and it will always apply to all pilots at all different skill levels. I look forward to us fulfilling our commitment as pilots to continuing education and good aeronautical decision making. Again, I appreciate all of you for taking the time to watch this live as a testament to your commitment to learning. One theme I want us to carry throughout this series is this, and I think this is important. I want us to be open, curious, and committed to learning. When we operate in this way, we stay resourced. So think SRM and CRM, right? So single pilot resource management and crew resource management. Use all available resources. The opposite of this is being closed, defensive, and committed to being right. This would be operating in an unresourced way. So think the opposite of SRM. This is not where we want to be as pilots. So let's all have a growth mindset where we focus on the process and the effort we put in. Effort is big. Let's not have a fixed mindset where we just focus on the outcome. I believe there are only winners and learners, so let's focus on that effort throughout our training and future pilot development. If you're not willing to fail, you're not willing to try, and let's learn to take a loss without being defeated. Yeah, I know this all kind of sounds like a therapy session, all right? But however, I believe these thoughts are vitally important as you progress through your very tough pilot training, and just as important after you receive your certificate. If you're just focused on getting your pilot certificate, that's a fixed mindset, which means you're just focused on the outcome. However, if you're focused on fulfilling our commitment as pilots to continuing education, good aeronautical decision making, and proper risk management, then you have a growth mindset, which means you focus on the process and the effort. In closing, and before we get into the topic today, let's think about three things, all right? What must we start? What must we stop? And what must we continue in order for us to meet our goals? Again, thank you for joining us wherever you are. All views expressed in the content is solely that of the person, does not necessarily reflect the views of the person's employer, company, institution, or other associated parties. This is not intended to be flight instruction. All views expressed is for reference only. Remember, these lives will be archived on my channel, so feel free to just sit back, relax, participate, and listen. You can go back later and dig deeper into the content. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. This is Kevin Cofield with Cofield Aviation. Welcome to the second YouTube live stream. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us, whether you're joining us, live, or if you're listening through the archives later on. Appreciate you talking with us. Now we are live from the great state of Alabama. We're going to talk ATC Communications in this video. So we're going to kind of walk through. We're going to discuss the regulatory requirements as far as in the FARs, procedure wise, like what do we have to do? We're going to then discuss also terms in the pilot controller glossary. And then after that, we're going to kind of go into the AIM and kind of discuss the recommended practices that the FAA outlines in the Aeronautical Information Manual. And so that kind of talks a little bit about techniques there. And then kind of last, we're going to kind of do simulated Class Charlie, Class Delta flight where we kind of chair fly it. And then last we're going to kind of discuss how do we effectively communicate? How do we reduce that anxiety of talking all things air traffic control, and also like helpful suggestions as well. And I will add, I have a friend that's a local controller at the Birmingham Class Charlie Airport. He has agreed to come on and do a live, so we're working out schedule wise, but sometime in the future, keep up. We're going to do a face-to-face talk with a live air traffic controller. So in the chat, in the comments, go ahead if you've got questions for an actual controller. Hit it up there in the chat. Let us know. If you can just say, hey, this is a question for the controller, and I'll populate a bunch of questions and make sure that he answers those. So that's going to be a great video. So the reason I kind of wanted to preface it today by from a pilot's perspective, air traffic control, and then we'll have him on, and he'll be able to give the air traffic controller's perspective. So that should help quite a bit. But wanted to go ahead. We've got Mr. Trent Blair. It's going to be joining us. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man.
Good.
Doing good.
Good.
Glad to be on.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you coming. So, Trent joined us in the first live video. Dustin also did, but Dustin had to work. Dustin had to save some lives today, right?
Yeah, saving lives.
Saving lives, man. Trent, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself again, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Trent Blair. I'm instrument rated commercial pilot. Currently working on CFI with Kevin. Not a ton of experience, but enough to know that I don't know anything. So, yeah, still learning. Um, man, enjoying it. Like
Yeah.
I think you always have this goal to get to a certain point, and then looking back, it's like, man, I miss like the days of just training for private pilot and instruments. Like, I don't know, man,
Yeah.
but it's been fun.
Good deal, man. I appreciate you taking the time to join me for this live. And just quickly reintroduce myself. I'm Kevin Cofield, about 9,000 hour pilot ATP. Got type ratings in Challenger and a Hawker. And been a CFI, CFII for about 17 years now. And like Trent said, I still don't know much, so we're all constantly learning. If you feel like you know it all, you're probably pretty dangerous. So let's just go ahead and get into the meat of things here. So I'm here on the CofieldAviation.com website. Again, I kind of said we're going to discuss the regulatory requirements, and then the AIM and the pilot controller glossary and all that good stuff. I'm going to try to keep that quick so we can kind of get in more of the everyday flying. Here's some stories from Trent, and so forth. But let's dig in. So we're going to go right here to the student section, and we're going to go to downloads and documents. And we're going to go right down here to basically this airspace communications and surveillance requirements, where we're going to kind of break down, what are the requirements. So this is more of like airspace stuff, as far as we got class A, B, C, D, E is right there behind Trent, and G is over there. It doesn't matter as long as you know that that's E and that's G. But we're going to focus in right here on the communication and the surveillance requirements. All right. So we're going to talk. IFR only is class A. So there's your communication requirements, right? Make sure flight level 180 to flight level 600. You're on an IFR flight plan, so we'll kind of skip that. But this is what is regulatory. So this is like you have to do this, right? And then the AIM is non-regulatory, where it's basically getting into position or suggestions and stuff like that. So communication-wise, in a class Bravo, so B stands for busy, right? I'm not going to go in and explain all the airspaces. If you don't know National Airspace System videos on the channel, we're just going to assume that everybody knows that. If you don't, after this, go check that out. But class Bravo, you're going to have two-way radio communication. But the big thing here is you got to be cleared through it. All right. So it's not just good enough to establish two-way radio communication. All right. And we're going to talk a little bit about like what is established in two-way radio communication? Now, that is specifically them coming back with your tail number. So when we talk all of this two-way radio communication stuff, is they've got to read back your tail number. So if they come back and go, all right, aircraft calling, stand by, well, they didn't identify you, right? So that is not establishing two-way radio communication. Now, if they come back and give you your tail number, so like our tail number is November 61651. So if we called up and they said, hey, November 61651, stand by, that is actually two-way radio communication established there. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. But not only do you have to establish that, you have to be cleared through it. All right, I've heard it several times on the radio before. Over in Atlanta, class Bravo, Cirrus pilot happened to, he was talking to ATC, he was communicating, but he happened to fly through class Bravo, and the controller was really nice. That's another thing we're going to kind of talk about in here. 99% of your controllers are going to be super nice, all right? And he was basically like, hey, man, you need clearance through the Bravo, but here it is. You're cleared through the Bravo at whatever altitude, all right? So that's a big one, cleared through. Student pilots with endorsements can fly through the class Bravo, so you'd have to have a specific endorsement from your instructor, and then private pilot license or higher. Surveillance-wise, so what is surveillance, right? So surveillance is your transponder. Now your transponder is basically, a box in the airplane that, the ATC radar will hit. It'll send a signal back. It gives them your altitude, your position, your flight path, your speed, and all that stuff. So surveillance-wise, within 30 nautical miles, that's commonly referred to as the Mode C VEL, 30 nautical miles from the primary Class B airport, regardless of altitude, you've got to have the Mode C and ADS-B out. So ADS-B is basically GPS based now. And then also within and above the class Bravo. So if you ever had a Bravo that was, below 10,000 feet, which many of them are not, if the Bravo kind of stopped at 9,000 feet, even though between 9 and 10, it could technically be echo airspace, if you were flying above it, you would have to have your transponder. Class Charlie, so this would be kind of like a, Birmingham two-way radio communication, comes back with tail number. We've already talked about that. You got to have Mode C, ADS-B out within and above that airspace. Class Delta, so usually just a little small towered field, only 4 nautical miles in diameter, surface 2,500. Two-way radio communication, got to come back with the tail number regulatory requirement wise. But you do not need a transponder. So surveillance wise, you do not need the transponder. This is Class Echo. So in Class Echo, there is no communication required, even though it's controlled airspace. You don't have to talk to ATC. But above 10,000 feet, you've got to have a Mode C transponder and ADS-B out. But below 10,000 feet, you do not, in Class Echo airspace, you don't need a transponder. And then Class G, there's no communication requirement. There is no surveillance requirement. So this is really it, right? So, all we have to do is establish two-way radio communication. But boy, does that not hit the anxiety button, right, Trent? Yes.
Yeah,
Like,
sure does, man.
yeah, so that's kind of what we're doing this video on. So you look at the regulatory, it's just like, all we got to do is talk to them. That's it. We just got to effectively communicate. That's all right? We got to 100% know what they want from us, and we've got to ensure 100% that they understand what we want from them. And then we just communicate. That's it, all right? That's it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the pilot controller glossary. Now, this is going to be basically terms outlined of like what stuff means. All right, so I didn't want to really get into depth of the aim and understanding all of that stuff without giving you some sort of terms. All right, so we're going to kind of do this fairly quickly. But basically what I've done, I haven't included every single term. I mean, there's 150 pages of terms, but the Pilot Controller Glossary is a great resource. If you have any question on what something means, this will spell it out. So if you want to know what, ATIS, what it stands for, PAPI, or like anything aviation-wise, Pilot Controller Glossary is the ticket. So basically, all I've highlighted are the most frequently used terms in pilot controller communications. All right, so they're printed in bold italics, and I basically just went down through and highlighted each one of them. So let's go ahead and start talking really quick here. A beam, all right. A beam means an aircraft is a beam, a fixed point. Basically, object is 90 degrees to the right or left of the aircraft track. A beam indicates a general position rather than a precise point. Abort means to terminate pre-planned aircraft maneuver, so like aborted takeoff or whatever. Acknowledge, so basically if they say, hey, acknowledge transmission, acknowledge whatever, let me know that you have received and understood the message. All right, we're going to be talking a lot about that, effective communication. Go down here, affirmative means yes. All right, hang in there with me. I know this is kind of boring, but just wanted to do that. Aircraft clearance, all right? So air traffic clearance, an authorization by air traffic control for the purpose of preventing collision between known aircraft, for an aircraft to proceed under specified traffic conditions within controlled airspace. The pilot in command of an aircraft may not deviate from the provisions of a VFR or IFR air traffic clearance except in emergency or unless an amended clearance has been obtained. All right, so this is basically saying when they tell you to do something, you can't not do that, right? So you have to do it if they say if they give you a clearance. All right. Additionally, the pilot may request a different clearance though from which one has been issued by air traffic control if information available to the pilot makes another course of action more practical, or if the aircraft equipment limitations or company procedures forbid compliance with the clearance issued. All right. So again, just effectively communicate. If it's not something you can do, get an amended clearance. Just talk to them. Let's see here. Company compliance. Okay. Pilots may also request clarification or amendment as appropriate. A time a clearance is not fully understood, or let's see. Also request clarification or amendment. Blah blah blah. Anytime clearance is not fully understood or considered unacceptable because of safety of flight. Controllers should, in such instances, and to the extent um, let's see, and to the extent of operational practicability and safety, honor the pilot's request. All right. 91.3 states the pilot in command of an aircraft is directly responsible for and is the final authority to the operation of the aircraft. The pilot is responsible to request an amended clearance if ATC issues a clearance that would cause a pilot to deviate from a rule or regulation, or in the pilot's opinion, would place the aircraft in jeopardy. All right. So if you're talking to air traffic control and you're going into class Charlie or class Delta and they assign you, okay, maintain VFR out above 4,500, you're coming up to a cloud layer and you know your 3152s, you're going to be 500 feet below, and the cloud layer is like right at 4,500 feet. You need to request amended clearance, right? You need to stay VFR. So that's kind of what this is talking about, that the pilot is responsible to request that amended clearance if ATC issues you a clearance that's going to basically, violate or make you deviate a rule. Okay. Um, some of the aircraft classes, wake turbulence stuff. All right, super. Uh, the only two airplanes out there, Airbus 380, heavy. You might hear on ATC, United so and so heavy. That's an airplane that weight's more than 300,000 pounds. Large is aircraft of more than 41,000 pounds, and then small, which is all your GA, your weight turbulence stuff, aircraft of 41,000 pounds or less. Airment, you guys should know what airment is, right? So airment is basically something issued for small airplanes, moderate turbulence, low level wind shear, moderate icing, freezing level. That doesn't really um, pertain to pilot controller communications, other than they will issue, they'll be like, hey, updated airment, so and so. Altitude readout. All right, so this is on their end. So it's an aircraft's altitude transmitted via the mode C transponder. So that's that surveillance we were talking about, right? The feature of this is visually displayed in 100-foot increments on the radar scope, having the readout capability. Altitude restrictions are canceled. Adherence to previously imposed altitude restrictions no longer required. Climb or descent, approach speed, back taxi. So back taxi, basically back taxiing on a runway. blind transmission, blocked, chase, and so forth. So I'm going to kind of just stop there and just let you know if you have any questions on the terms that we're talking about or any sort of thing like that. Go to the the downloads tabs in the website and go here to pilot controller glossary. And I've basically just highlighted all of those terms for you. All right. So anything you don't kind of understand, hit that up. I'm not going to take the full time and go over all of those. All right. So now let's delve into the aim a little bit, and that's where maybe we can get into some conversations and um, and see what the FAA kind of wants us to do here.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so kind of explain, air traffic control centers, control towers. Control towers, they've been established to provide, this is their basic job, all right? This is basic job of ATC, provide for a safe and orderly and expeditious flow of traffic on in the vicinity of an airport, all right? When the responsibility has been so delegated, towers also provide separation for IFR aircraft and stuff, all right? Um, now, this kind of talks a little bit about uncontrolled fields. So I'm not going to really get into that because we're kind of talking ATC communication. But this basically is telling you, hey, in an uncontrolled field, if you have a radio, use it. Even though it's not regulatory required, hey, you should really use that. Make sure you got the CTAF tuned up there. Call before taxi, call before departure, call 10 minutes out, 10 miles out, and call entering the downwind, the base, the final, leaving the runway, all that good stuff. Again, call about 10 miles out. All right, if you're departing, um, um, call prior to departure. Boy, this one is a pet peeve of mine. All right, so if you look right here, all right, so self-pronounced procedure whereby pilots broadcast their position of intended flight. Um, Ground operations, so everything uncontrolled as we're broadcasting, but pilots stating, and I quote, traffic in the area, please advise, is not a recognized self-denounced for position and or intention phrase and should not be used under any condition. I used to say that back in the day. Have you ever heard that on the
Yeah,
CTAF?
all the time, man.
All the time.
Hear it
It's
all
like,
the
hey,
time, and
hey,
yeah.
traffic in the area, please
And last,
advise.
what else? Last call,
Yeah,
like
last call. Yeah,
last
right,
call.
right, exactly. Exactly. So, hey guys, anybody that's watched this video, do not say traffic in the area, please advise. The AIM specifically says, hey, don't do that. All right. Straight in landings. All right. I get this from students all the time. It's like, is a straight in landing prohibited? Like, can you do a straight in landing? And this kind of talks about it. It's like, yeah, you can, but the FAA discourages VFR straight in approaches to landings due to the increased risk of a mid-air collision, right? Why do we have traffic patterns? Keep the flow going, right? However, if a pilot chooses to execute a straight-in approach for landing without entering the airport traffic pattern, the pilot should self-announce that position in the designated CTAF approximately 8 to 10 miles from the airport and coordinate their straight-in approach and landing with other aircraft in the traffic pattern. Pilots executing this straight in do not have priority over other aircraft in the traffic pattern and must comply with 91-113, the right-of-way rules. All right, so it does say, hey, you can do it. Remember the aim is not regulatory, right? There's nothing that says you have to fly a traffic pattern, but obviously they're going to recommend it if something was to happen. They're going to go to this here, but enter the traffic pattern. But sometimes for practice, for when I'm teaching students and practicing to send them to air traffic control stuff, then we will practice straight in approaches and all that stuff and enter just the left base because Trey, like when you go do your flights like Chattanooga or whatever, I mean, do you ever really enter the traffic pattern much?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably been to Chattanooga, I don't know, 15, 20 times. And I think one time I was asked to join a downwind, but it was literally just because they were using the opposite runway. I mean, so
Yeah.
usually it's join a, straight in for runway 02 or
Yep.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, but AIM says you can do straight ins, but the big thing is here is it doesn't give you priority. All right. So, flying in the jet and stuff like we do, I always still, if I'm at an uncontrolled airport, I still enter the traffic pattern just like anybody else. Obviously, if you're shooting approaches or stuff, you can't do that. Um, but it still doesn't give you precedence over other people. So just wanted to kind of throw that in as far as um, uncontrolled airports. All right, so we'll keep on down here. Hey, do you ever do like the air-to-air stuff? So like if you're like, hey, go to frequency so and so, and let's chat about X, Y, and Z. That's where this
Um,
is.
I've done it a couple times. What is it? Fingers 123 to
Yeah.
45.
Yeah. So, but if you look right here, and I was the
Yes,
same
I'm not
way.
supposed to do it, right?
Yeah, you're not supposed to do it on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because it says it's assignment to flight test land and aircraft stations. So not for air-to-air communications, but what 2275 is. So
Yeah.
2275 is for air, for your private fixed-wing aircraft air-to-air communication. So, but they do discourage. They're not like, the FCC is not, they designate this frequency for air-to-air stuff, but it should be under the confines of you know flying stuff. So it's not they still tell you it's not meant to do chat, right? How's
Right. Yeah.
how's life going or whatever. But if it
Yeah.
helps you
Yeah.
in a formation flight or whatever, that's all good. All right, so we'll be talking about this when we chair fly our little Class Charlie, Class Delta stuff. Hey, pilots should listen to the ATIS broadcast whenever an ATIS is available. Pilots should notify controllers on initial contact that they've received that ATIS broadcast. Let's see here. It's good practice for the pilots to make to listen to that ATIS, tell ATC they have that ATIS. Now, but there are some places, a lot of the Class Delta, some of them don't have ATISs, but they give you like wind, runway, maybe altimeter information. And so, kind of the term there you would use would be like have the numbers. Hey, I have the numbers is kind of what the AIM says there to do. But most of them will have, especially the Class Charlies, they'll all have ATISs and stuff. So provisions of service. So this kind of talking about like what services they can do, right? But the big key here is limitations of the radar, the volume of traffic, controller workload, and communications. Frequency congestions could prevent the controller from providing you any VFR services. So you got to kind of understand ATC's job in the National Airspace System is to control IFR aircraft. All right. So any VFR guys, so our students, or you're up, flying in the 172 and your VFR, you're not on the IFR flight plan. They will, most controllers will handle you, but it's a workload permitting basis, so they don't have to. All right. Um, Now, obviously, if you're going
Yeah.
into, yeah, go ahead, man.
Well, I was going to say, man, there's been several times like going east towards Atlanta, call up Atlanta Center, and I've kind of learned my lesson by now. But little Cessna 150 calling up Atlanta Center for flight following, and they're just so busy and saturated with IFR traffic. I mean, there's been a couple times that not really, they're not being rude, but it's
Yeah,
just like they're so busy. It's like VFR traffic, I can't handle you right now. You just have
yeah,
to, you just got to forget about it. Sorry. And
yeah, yeah.
I've kind of learned like I just kind of learned like if they're super busy, won't even ask for flight following,
There
but
you go.
listen for a little bit. If they're
That's good.
don't have so much going on, might ask for flight following. But yeah, definitely busy airspace like Atlanta and
Yeah,
stuff. That's what that's written for, man. I mean,
yeah,
completely.
absolutely. Yeah, they don't have to work you,
Right.
right? So it's a workload permitting basis. All right. So it's entirely dependent upon whether the controllers believe they are in a position to provide it. When providing the radar services, the pilot should monitor and stay on the assigned frequencies at all times. Um, when advisory service is no longer desired, advise the controller before change of frequencies, and then change the transponder code to 1200. If applicable, pilot should inform the controller when change of frequencies, right? So if you only have one radio, I used to have that. I did all my private in 150. I only had one radio. So like when I wanted to listen to the ATIS, I'd have to request permission to, get off frequency, or if I needed to listen to whatever, you had to request permission to get off frequency for that. All right. Again, basically radar service, radar assisted VFR aircraft. The VFR aircraft provided they can communicate with the facility or within radar coverage and can be radar identified. Then, if workload permitting basis, um, they'll give you that um, radar identification or those radar services. Um, you will be unable to determine if flight into instrument conditions will result from their instructions. All right. So controllers don't know if they tell you turn right heading so and so, or maintain at or above 4,500. Like they don't know if that's going to put you in instrument conditions. Uh, so to avoid possible hazards resulting from being vectored into IFR conditions, pilots should keep controllers advised of the weather conditions in which they are operating and along the course ahead there. So, just talk to them, right? Here's what they're doing. They're giving you safety alerts, traffic advisories, limited radar vectoring. All right. So this is basically what approach control does. At Class Charlie airports, basically their job is to get you to the tower, basically get you to where you see the airport, and then from there you're done. So again, traffic information is on a workload permitting basis. Pilots of arriving VFR aircraft should initiate radio contact on the published frequency with approach control approximately 25 miles. May provide the pilot with routing, so that's your lateral navigation, turn left heading so and so, turn right heading so and so, or whatever, or vectors necessary for proper sequencing with participating VFR and IFR traffic. All right, so they are when you we'll go through that flight like into the Class Charlie is you're going to contact them, but once you establish radio communication, they give you squawk code, they give you that transponder code that you're putting in there, they radar identify you, then you can just enter the traffic pattern, fly as you want, fly whatever altitude you want. We're going to read here in just a minute, they do want us to advise when we're leaving an altitude, but you can do whatever you want because you're VFR, right? Let's see. Keep going through here. All right, so must maintain an altitude when assigned by ATC. Well, this is easy. You must maintain heading, you must maintain altitude when they tell you to maintain 4,500. Birmingham does this all the time. Maintain, VFR at or above 4,500, right? But when assigned by ATC, you must maintain that altitude unless the altitude assignment is to maintain. Let's see. Must maintain an altitude when assigned by ATC unless the altitude assignment is to maintain at or below a specified altitude. So it's kind of what we're talking about. And then resume VFR altitudes means you can do whatever you want to, right? But when not um, assigned an altitude, pilots should coordinate with ATC prior to the altitude change. So that's kind of what we were talking right there. Here's our responsibility as a pilot there, all right? So I'm just going to read this. All right, these services are not to be interpreted as relieving pilots of their responsibilities to see and avoid other traffic operating in basic VFR weather conditions, to adjust their operations in flat path as necessary to preclude serious wake encounters, to maintain appropriate terrain and obstacle clearance, or to remain in weather conditions equal to or better than the minimums required by 91-155 whenever compliance with an assigned route, heading, and/or altitude is likely to compromise pilot responsibility, reflecting terrain and obstruction. Clearance, vortex exposure, and weather minimums. Approach control should be so advised, and revised clearance should be attained. We already talked about that, right? Have you ever had a situation like that, Trent? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's been, I can remember, so you're saying times that I had to like ask for
yeah, like an amended
lower or whatever for,
clearance.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So there was a time, and this kind of like ties in with the anxiety of talking to ATC. I did my training in uncontrolled airfield at Gadsden. Had 20, 25 hours of just calling downwind base final. That's basically all. The extent of my radio communication was automatic. So
Hmm.
going on my long cross country, I think it was to Tuscaloosa. So I was going to be passing over the Class Charlie at Birmingham.
Hmm.
And like I planned my altitude so I'd go over the Charlie, like wouldn't have to talk to ATC. That's how nervous I was
Hmm.
about it. So there was like a cloud layer. I think the bases were like right at 4,500 or so. I was flying over at 6,500. I was like, okay, I don't want to get stuck on top of the clouds. So down to 4,500, too high. And I was like, man, I'm going to have to talk to ATC. Like,
Hmm.
which I was going to have to talk to them at Tuscaloosa, but I wasn't quite
Yeah.
as intimidated, like being a Delta. So called up ATC, 61651, like, 25 miles to the east. And I just remember stuttering and I was so nervous. Like,
Hmm.
anyways, yeah, there was like maintained VFR at or above, I think 4,500.
Yep.
So I'm at 4,500. I'm coming up on these clouds, and I'm like, I'm not gonna. I'm either
Hmm.
gonna fly into these clouds, or I'm gonna be like really
Yeah.
close
There
and
you
just
go.
be able to, maintain my legal clearances. So that was kind of a situation where I had to talk to them, and yeah, I had to get lower. And of course, they like super accommodating. It was no big deal whatsoever.
Sure.
But I mean, I thought that I was gonna get like a phone number to call or something just for asking them, to get lower. But yeah,
Yeah.
no big deal.
No big deal, right? And that's exactly what it's telling you here is what your power
Yeah,
responsibility is exactly what you did. It's like, hey, just call them up and get an amended clearance, right? I mean, the thing here is effective communication. That is the absolute most important thing, is that 100% they know what you want and what your intentions are, what your requests are, and you which you 100% understand what they're telling you and what they want to view, right? And any time that you don't understand that, then say again, get make sure 100% that you know that stuff. So yeah, it's a good story there for sure. This is kind of talking about transponder ADSB use on the ground. I use technically altitude reporting on the ground. If you're so equipped in the jet, we have TARA, which is like um, um, traffic alerting and resolution stuff. It's a fancy stuff in the jet, but technically they say operating mode C and then that TARA on takeoff. Um, but that's basically just saying, hey, use mode C even on the ground. Um, and here is where they're basically saying, hey, use that transponder in uncontrolled or uncontrolled airspace or class E airspace. Basically, whenever you're flying, keep your transponder on. Is kind of what they're saying there. Um, so VFR is 1200. Trent, you ever do any formation flying?
um, rarely. Every now and then, when we go to, I will fly up to Gunnersville for breakfast or
Yeah, cool.
Winchester or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
On the 150, we're really too slow to fly with anybody else, so
yeah.
it doesn't happen very often. But
Nice. Um, Yeah, so obviously the regulation side of that is, um, you know, you have to coordinate with the other PIC, right? So that's the regulatory thing. Other than that, this is what the AIM kind of suggests, right? But VFR standard formation flight that is not receiving ATC services, you should basically squawk a code of 1203. Um, and then once established in formation, all other craft should squawk standby and disable ADSB transmission. So basically, if you're not in ATC, like if you're going to Gunnersville, right, for breakfast, the lead airplane should squawk 1203 and then have everybody else turn their transponders off in ADSB. Um, and if you're in formation flight receiving ATC services, so if you're doing that formation flight going into Birmingham, right, or Chattanooga or whatever in Class Charlies, then pilots can expect ATC to direct all non-lead aircraft to stop squawk. So stop squawk meaning, turn your transponder off, and should not do so though until instructed. So basically, let ATC tell you what they want you to do. But usually they'll just have the lead airplane squawk whatever code that they give you. And remember, when they're giving you a squawk code, that is just aircraft specific, right? So they're kind of typing in. We can talk, with the air traffic controller when we have them on, but I'm assuming they're just putting in a flight plan in there of your destination, and obviously it's giving your altitude and heading and ground speed and direction of flight and all that stuff. Um, but they're giving you that exact code to put in your transponder so that they know exactly who you are there. VFR gliders should squawk 1202 instead of 1200. And there's 496 codes, that 4-digit codes designations will be used for the squawk stuff. All right. Let's see here. This is a big one. So why don't we check on, when we check on with ATC, or if we're doing the initial contact or whatever, we talk about, we report our altitude. So, like, Trent, when you're going into Chattanooga and they switch frequencies, they say contact Chattanooga approach on, blah, 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 then you're checking in with the exact altitude and flight level with each controller. Well, the reason why you do that is because they have to verify that your transponder, what it's putting out in 100-foot increments on their radar scope, is accurate. And the reason why they have to do that is because they want to make sure that is saying exactly where you are. And so the only way that they can verify that is with you. So that's why, hey, 61651, 5,500. Right. And so then they're looking at their scope and, oh, yep, it's 5,500, and then that's good to go. If you don't do that, then they'll come over here and ask you, hey, what's your altitude? And so, but if you check on with your altitude, this will significantly reduce, verification requests. So it just makes their job easier. All right. Ident feature, right? So ident is basically, it creates a flash on their radar. So if they say, 61651 ident, then they're trying to find you. All right. So you should have a little ident button on your transponder. When you hit that, it'll flash up, and they'll be able to see you. Just don't use that ident unless requested by ATC right here. All right. Also, this basically goes into, hey, when we're changing codes, don't go into 7500, don't go into 7600, don't go through 7700 changing codes. That's not good. Don't do 7777. Um, uh, that's for military interceptors. Here's all of the transponder and ADS-B out requirements that we covered. The only thing we didn't cover right here is you got to have transponder and ADS-B out in Class E airspace at or above 3,000 feet MSL over the Gulf of Mexico from the coastline of the United States out to 12 nautical miles. It's a fun one. This is talking about it doesn't apply to aircraft originally certified without an electrical system. In-flight requests for immediate deviation from the transponder requirements may be approved if it's failed in flight. All right, so this is basically like if you're going into Birmingham and your transponder is not working, your ADS-B is not working. Can you do it? If it happened in flight, then the controllers might approve you with that failed equipment to operate. Otherwise, if it's a known issue, you got to get 1 hour before, you got to get contact the tower by telephone or approach control by telephone and get permission that you can fly in that airspace without a transponder.
Yeah, that actually happened to us.
Oh, did it? Did it?
Yeah, yeah, man. We had an old dinosaur transponder in the 150, and I think it was Dustin and I were flying into Birmingham one night to do like some night landings, and we called them up, 20 something miles out, and they couldn't see us. So what in the world? Well, they could see us on radar, but our transponder wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
So they were having us turn 20 degrees to the right, 20 degrees to the left, and they identified us by our turns, and we were able to still go in with no transponder
Okay.
and then get back out of there. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not. I guess if you were in busier airspace, maybe no, but yeah,
Yeah.
they were able to get us in
Nice.
that night. Yeah,
Nice.
so no transponder now, but
Well, see, there you go. So you got a real world example
using
of that. I'm
yeah,
kind of
man.
I'm kind of getting a theme from you that ATC is not the big bad wolf that some people think.
No, dude, they're great.
They are
They're
great.
great.
They are great. All right, real quick here, we're going to talk about some radio communication techniques from ATC. Let's see. You know, this is kind of what we're going to be talking about when we kind of do our, more or less discussion. But this is the key, right? The single most important thought in pilot controller communications is understanding, right? Like you just have to communicate. That's it. Communicate. Like we talked about, they got to know what you want. You got to know what they want, right? It is essential, therefore, the pilots acknowledge each radio communication with ATC by using the appropriate aircraft call sign, all right? Brevity is important and contact should be kept as brief as possible, but yeah, it's got to be brief, but um, let's see, I lost my but controllers must know what you want to do before they can properly carry out their control duties, all right? And you, the pilot, must know exactly what the controller wants you to do, since concise phraseology may not always be accurate or adequate here. So this is telling you, hey, you don't have to use the perfect phraseology all the time. Use whatever words are necessary to get your message across, all right? Pilots are to maintain vigilance in monitoring air traffic control radio communication frequencies for potential traffic conflicts with their aircraft, especially when operating on an active runway or when conducting a final approach to landing. All right. So we don't have to use the perfect phraseology, just communicate. That's it. Right. Um, all pilots will find in the pilot controller glossary. That's what we started off with. Um, basically, um, so the pilot control glossary is used, and this we recommend that it's studied and reviewed from time to time to sharpen your communication skills. All right. Uh, Here's kind of what we talk about. Radar techniques as far our radio techniques is listen before you transmit. You were talking about that, Trent, right? Like you go to Atlanta approach or whatever, and you like listen a little bit, right? You don't just pull up the radio and start talking. Um,
Yeah,
you know, Listen a little bit. Make sure it's clear, before you talk. Think before keying your transmission. Know what you're going to say. Um, Speak in a normal conversational tone. Microphone should be very close to your lips. Um, and if you need to, like write it down. We're gonna, I'm gonna show kind of a little checklist that I've, brought for the students um, to use going into class Charlie and Delta here in just a few minutes when we talk kind of chair fly that. Make sure your microphone's not stuck in transmit mode. So our avionics, right? Like it'll show a little TX if you're transmitting. It'll show RX when you're receiving. If you look up there and you got a stuck mic, that's not good. I had that happen the other day, actually. I was able to get it unstuck, but I got done with my transmission and looked up and it still said TX. And fortunately, I didn't say anything stupid, right? So that's that's I didn't say anything at all because I knew it was transmitting. But that can be a problem, right? So if there's a stuck mic, you could clog up the frequency. But this brings me up to another point. It's like monitor guard frequency. Do you ever do that much, Trent?
yeah. I mean, every cross country flight for sure. If
Yeah,
I'm, yeah, I'm monitoring
yeah.
guard for sure.
To me, this is the peace of mind. So guard is the 121.5 is like, it's just a peace of mind because if you fly outside their radio coverage or they forget to change, they forget about you, especially as a VFR flat following, they may, forget about you entirely. Um, you know, Monitoring guard, if they'll come up on 121.5 and they'll say, hey, November 61651 on guard, if you hear this transmission, ident, and go to frequency so and so, right? So to me, it's just a backup. So I try to do it all the time. Um, Also, if you had a stuck mic and you didn't know it was you, they would go, "Hey, there's an aircraft on this frequency has a stuck mic." They would say that on guard, right? So that might help in that standpoint. But everybody, um, we've got two radios basically, and just use that second one to monitor guard, right? You'll hear a lot of unprofessional pilots on that though. What, what, have you heard some of that stuff, Trent? Like the meows and all that on guard? Like,
Oh, yeah.
oh my gosh. It's like, it's so if you can put up with that, that's whatever. Here's the key, all right? Initial contact stuff. Who you're talking to, all right? Who are you? Where are you? And not only where are you, but like laterally and vertically. So like where are you? Trent, you talked about 25 miles east, and then say vertically too. So give them a 3D picture, right, of where you are, and then what do you want? That's as simple as it is. Who you're talking to, who you are, where you are in a 3D picture, laterally and vertically, and what do you want, right? And be prepared to write it down. When you do that initial contact, they're going to give you a squawk code because they got to see you. You're just a random person, right? So they're going to give you a designated squawk code that you put in your transponder. So now they know that is you, and that is this Cessna 172 that's flying to this airport and blah blah blah, right? Um, so that's the big key there is who you're talking to, who you are, where you are, what do you want? All right. Let's see here. Acknowledge all call ups. Acknowledge the instruction when you're advised to change frequencies. Talked about it right here. Monitor 121 for peace of mind. Improper use of call signs. So this is basically saying, hey, just say Cessna or whatever. I didn't know this. Air taxis or other commercial operators not having FAA authorized call signs should preface their normal identification with the phonetic word tango. I didn't know that.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't know. Uh, let's see. Student pilots radio identification. All right. Here is for you guys and private pilots that are not all that comfortable for ATC with ATC stuff. The FAA desires to help student pilots in acquiring sufficient practical experience in the environment in which they will be required to operate. To receive additional assistance while operating in areas of concentrated air traffic, student pilots need only identify themselves as a student pilot during the initial call to an FAA facility. Just tell them you're a student pilot, and they'll slow it down. It's not that hard, right? This special identification will alert FAA ATC personnel, enable them to provide student pilots with such extra assistance and consideration as they may need. It is recommended that student pilots identify themselves at each contact with the different controller, right? So that controller is probably not calling ahead and telling the other guy, hey, you got a student pilot, right? So every single time you change frequencies, just tell them you're a student pilot, right? And that can help kind of slow things down. uh Phonetic alphabet, right? Won't go into all of that stuff, but that's in the aims. Here's some of the phraseology to how you're supposed to say that. So that would be an example of 500, 1,000, 500. Numbers above 9,900 must be spoken by separating the digits preceding the word. So 1,000. So this would be 10,000. This would be 13,500. Victor 1-2. Or Victor 12. This would be example would be like 10. We're supposed to say point. So if a radio frequency contains a decimal point, the decimal point is spoken as point, unless ICAO procedures, you can be spoken as decimal. All right, the FAA will recognize that, but here in the U.S., because we do everything different than ICAO, just say point. Again, altitudes, let's see, 2,000, 2,500, flight level 190, flight level 275, directions, and so forth. So, but again, who cares about proper phraseology? Just get the point across of what you want. If you're becoming a professional pilot, read all this. All right, you want to sound professional, you want to do it right. But if you're just a student pilot or private pilot, like who cares if you said, instead of 2,500, you said 12,500. I think you get the point across, right? Zulu time, know how to do Zulu time. Um, Here's kind of how they break down if you've got inoperative equipment of basically if your receiver is inoperative, but you can transmit, stay outside the controlled airspace, um, and determine the direction of flow of traffic, and then advise the tower your type aircraft position, request to land, look for light signals. If your transmitter is inoperative but you can hear, remain outside the Class D until direction of flow of traffic has been determined. Join the traffic pattern. Look for light gun signals during the daylight. Rock your wings. Flash your nav lights at night. If both of them are inoperative, remain outside or above the Class Delta surface area until the direction of flow has been determined. Enter the traffic pattern, maintain visual contact with the tower, receive the light signals, acknowledge it by what we just said above, and then departing, call them up. All right. So if you experience a radio failure prior to leaving the parking area, make every possible way to get that equipment repaired. But if you can't, give them a call and basically get permission. Then same thing like gun signals. All right. And this basically has to do with flight service stations and communicating for VFR flights there. All right, real quick, let's just see if anything is here. Operating with control towers, how to enter traffic patterns, upwind, downwind, crosswind, base, final approach. And again, all these highlighted items, it's on the website. So I'm just basically hitting the highlights so we can get into more of the meat stuff. This is talked about how you enter the traffic pattern, exit the traffic pattern. Don't make unexpected maneuvers in the traffic pattern. ATC can expect you to do S-turns, all right, but they don't expect you to do 360s and stuff, all right? Let's see, land and hold short operations, that's a special emphasis items. You don't have to accept them. Let's see, yep, there is land and hold short, communications. It's basically saying like, okay, you go from ground, automatically contact tower. When you're ready for departure, you can go ahead and swap that. For non-turbine pilots, let them know you're ready for departure. But if, when you get to flying professional jets, they're supposed to assume when you reach the run-up or warm-up block area that you're ready for takeoff. All right.
Never knew that.
Yeah. So, us turbines, so the tower controller will consider that pilots of turbine power aircraft are ready for takeoff when they reach the runway, unless advised otherwise. So that doesn't always happen though, because you'll sit there and be like looking. It's like, what's the holdup? And they'll just call up, hey, you ready? I was like, yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah.
So we're always ready. A pilot who has just landed should not change from the tower frequency to the ground control frequency until directed to do so by the controller, right? The big thing here is you land and you get the entire aircraft past that hold short line, regardless if you have to go into a ramp or if you go into, taxi, whatever. All right, they're room for you. They know you're coming, but just exit the runway as quick as possible. get your entire airplane past that hold short and then stop. All right, you don't have a clearance to go past that, but just stop. And then don't change that frequency until tower tells you to. And most of the time, they'll say contact ground on ground point whatever. Well, that's because I think it said up here earlier, yeah, all ground frequencies are between 121.6 and 121.9. So they'll kind of omit this 121 because it's just assumed. Let's see here. All right, so taxiing, right? You must attain permission prior to moving an aircraft onto the movement area. So I'll be doing a video on airport markings and signs at some point, but the designation of movement area, non-movement area. Just a single solid line, single dash line. Clearance must be obtained prior to taxiing on the runway, taking off, landing. Clearance must be obtained crossing any runway. This is huge FAA emphasis item right now is runway incursion avoidance, right? Huge FAA. So basically this is saying in the movement area, you have to have permission to do everything. All right. You have to have permission to taxi. You have to have permission to cross runways. You have to have permission to take off. You have to have permission to land. So you just have to have permission. Just communicate who you're talking to, who you are, where you are, and what do you want, basically. Let's see here. Okay, so this happens quite a bit. If a pilot is expected to hold short of a runway approach or departure, or an ILS critical area, ATC will issue instructions. All right. So if they tell you to taxi to runway so and so via Alpha Bravo or whatever, and you come up on let's just say it's a runway 29 approach. You'll see this in Lexington. I think there's one in Lexington, Kentucky. There's one in the Chicago Midway. There's one in Memphis. But anyways, it looks exactly like a hold short line. It is two solid lines and it is two dash lines. And when you come up to it, you're going to be coming up to two solid lines. So, what do we know as pilots? We come up to two solid lines. That's a runway hold short, right? But always look next to it. If it says, runway 29 approach or runway so and so approach, you don't have to hold short of it unless ATC tells you. If you come across just the two solid lines with the little ladder looking stuff, right? The ILS hold short line, you don't have to hold short of that either unless ATC tells you. All right. But at the end of the day, if you're unsure, stop and ask. All right. Let's see here. Taxi instructions received from the controller. Pilot should always read back the runway assignment, always read back any clearance to enter a runway, any instructions to hold short of a specific runway or line up and wait. You have to acknowledge all of that stuff. Pilot in command of the aircraft is directly responsible for and the final authority of the operation of that aircraft. If you're not familiar, get step-by-step directions. All right, they call that a progressive taxi. If you're just unfamiliar and whatever, just get a progressive taxi. State your position, all of that. We're going to go through all of this in just a minute. Again, this is exiting the runway. Get off. All right. Change your ground control when advised by the tower, and so forth. Let's see. Here's clear for the option, right? What does that mean, Trent?
Well, you're cleared to land, low approach, touch and go, stop and go. So
That's exactly right.
anything you need to do, basically.
Exactly right. They also tell us that when we're crossing a runway to bring all our lights on. So strobe lights, landing lights, all that stuff when we're crossing runways. When we're entering the departure, bring everything on up. If you get a line up and wait, bring all the lights on except your landing light. And then once you get clear for takeoff, turn your landing light on. It's kind of talking about that. Here are all your line guy signal stuff. I'm obviously not going to get into that, but it's all in the AIM. And let's see here. I think we're almost done. Special VFR. You got to have a clearance to do that. Pilot's discretion stuff. This is more like IFR, so I'm not going to really get into that. Let's see here. Speed restrictions. This kind of brings you back to where we were talking about the airspace requirements as far as um, the dimensions, communication, surveillance requirements. Also in that is, sorry about that. Also in that is like speed requirements. So 250 knots below 10,000 feet, 200 knots below the class Bravo, and then 200 knots within 4 nautical miles, 2,500 feet AGL of a class Charlie and a class Delta. ATC cannot give you instructions to violate that FAR. All right, so that's Federal Aviation Regulation. So ATC, if you're below the class Bravo and they say maintain 230 knots, you can't do that. You got to advise, hey, I'm going to do 200 knots. They can't give you that instruction. Below 10,000 feet, they can't give you that. However, within that 4 nautical mile and 2,500 AGL with class Charlie and class Delta, that 200 knot restriction, they actually can waive that. All right, so you have to ask for permission to waive that, but that's the only one in the regs. I forget it. It breaks it down here. Let's see. Right here. Yeah. So for operations in Class C and D surface area, ATC is authorized to request or approve a speed greater than the maximum indicated airspeed that's prescribed in 91.117. So that's more like jet stuff, but they can do that. So, all right, man, why don't we walk through here? Basically, let's talk about some general stuff. If we're arriving into Birmingham class Charlie, this is kind of like what I give the students to try to make it as easy as possible. So flying from Gadsden to Birmingham, Trent, jump in if you got anything here. But basically, after you leave the traffic pattern in Gadsden, you're within 30 miles. You know, the AIM said 25 miles. We're going to do the following, right? We're going to listen to the ATIS. So we're going to write down the winds, the runway in use. We're going to set the altimeter, and we're going to put in right here, we have information so and so, right? We're going to change frequency to the Birmingham approach. We get this frequency in the AFD and also on the sectional chart. We're going to wait to make sure it's clear, right? And then basically, here's what we're going to do. We're going to say, hey, Birmingham approach, November 61651. This is our initial contact, all right? And then there goes 61651, go ahead. We're going to say, hey, 61651, we're assessing 172. We're 25 miles in the northeast at 4,500. We're inbound for landing with information and so forth, right? They're going to say squawk, so be ready to write it down because they got to identify you. You're going to squawk. And then the next thing they're going to say is that your radar contact so many miles northwest. They'll give you maybe instructions. So maintain VFR at above 4,500 is kind of like what you said earlier. Altimeter so-and-so, all right? Maybe possibly where you're parking on the field. But everything from here, after you get the squawk and the radar identified, everything here is just uh, you're going to be maneuvering the airplane, like the AIM says, to enter the traffic pattern. You can climb, you can descend. They do want you to advise ATC when you climb or descend, but your VFR, you can do whatever you want. All right, they have you radar identified. If they come back and tell you to, maintain an altitude, you have to. Or maintain a heading, you have to. But otherwise, um, you can basically do whatever you want. And then their only job is to get you to visualize on the airport. And then once you say, hey, they'll point it out, airport's 10 o'clock, 10 miles or something. Once you get that in sight, then they'll say, all right, enter left base, runway 24, enter straight in, runway 24. They'll give you instructions and then tell you to contact tower. And then tower then clears you to land. And then we, exit the runway as quick as possible. get past the hold short, contact ground. You tell ground where you want to taxi, um, and then you just taxi in from there. But the big thing here is to make sure you have a plan. All right. So have your airport diagram out. Read back all hold short instructions. Sometimes they'll say taxi within. So if they are not busy, then they'll combine tower and ground. Um, but have that airport diagram out. But this is kind of like chair flying the night before. Is based upon winds, like what runway you're going to be landing on, and pull up the airport diagram, and kind of highlight where you think you're going to taxi. For you're going to land on this runway, you'll probably exit this or this or this. It's going to be left turn off, and then I've got a taxi to this FBO, and then that taxi route means I'm going to cross a hold short or something, right? So just prep and make sure that you're good to go there, as far as just knowing ahead of time. In worst case scenario, exit the runway, ask for a step-by-step instruction taxi, um, ask for a progressive taxi. That's kind of the fourth phase of flight. You got takeoff, landing, and route, and taxiing is the fourth phase of flight. And that's where the largest aviation disaster ever happened, was a runway incursion avoidance. So two 747s. I forget what island, but the two 747s runway incursion, the largest aviation disaster happened on the ground. So that is just as important as taxi and takeoff, um, and landing and so forth. So, Trent, talk to me a little bit. I mean, what's your experiences with ATC, and like what would your if somebody came to you and either wanted to get experience with ATC or whatever, like what's some of the stuff that you've learned over the years of flying about ATC, and like how to effectively communicate, and kind of how to get over that anxiety and stuff.
Yeah, I'll just say repetition. I mean,
Yeah.
I was as anxious as you could possibly imagine. I mean, um, had no trouble flying the airplane, super confident with flying the airplane, but it was something about ATC. You tune into frequency, Birmingham approach, Atlanta center, whatever, and you hear all these professional pilots, these airline guys, just talking so fast you can hardly
Hmm.
understand them, and everybody's talking so fast, everything's happening so fast, and then kind of thinking myself as just like this little guy on a 150 doesn't really know all the phraseology these guys are using. So super intimidating at first, but
Yeah.
uh, I mean, just it kind of motivated me to get to that point, and I'm still not at that point, but a lot better. Definitely not intimidated anymore. But just listening to
Hmm.
live ATC like at work, I would just listen to it and just
Yeah.
kind of get used to that, and get flight following every time I had the chance, and even as an instrument rated pilot, kind of using a little bit different phraseology. I would it'd be a perfect clear in a million day, and I'd file IFR just to kind of get some repetition with that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I'd just say repetition. I mean, ATC is super accommodating. Like you said, 99.9% of them are just super nice. They're there to help and
Yeah.
want you to do good. So I mean, they understand. Everybody starts somewhere.
Yeah.
I would say repetition. Listen to ATC live, looking over, everything we looked over today, and it's really not that bad. I mean, after a few flights, just kind of getting working the system, man, it's just becomes second nature, and you learn the
Yeah.
phraseology, and it's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. With especially like the live ATC stuff. Just listen to that, listen to that, listen to that, and getting that phraseology, and really once your repetition, like you talked about, is you're gonna learn to expect what's going to be next. So
Right? Yeah.
they'll be talking fast, but you kind of know what they should be saying next. But again, every single radio contact, tell them you're a student pilot. Even if you're not a student pilot and you're just nervous about it, tell them until you get comfortable enough. And these guys, they're going to be good. they'll slow it down. They'll make sure you 100% understand. They'll kind of watch out a little bit more for you, right? So it's just effective communication stuff. And some of the advice that I kind of wanted to give. I've got a good friend of mine, Blake Crow, that flies a SR-20 out of Birmingham. Great airplane, by the way. But I did his private and his instrument, and he has only flown out of a Class Charlie. And I was hoping to have him on tonight, along with Trent, but he had other stuff going on. But we talked earlier today, and it's kind of some of his advice that he was talking about, and I agreed with as well as like how much of a resource ATC is. Like, a lot of people are so scared to talk to them, but when we talk about single pilot resource management and like using all available resources, we have ForeFlight, we have ADSB, we have all that good stuff. But ATC is a fantastic resource as far as, especially when it comes to weather. If you're VFR flying and in the summertime in Alabama, they can be a helpful addition to be like, hey, I'm looking at this. I'm thinking about going this way or this way. Like, what do you see, right? They have real-time radar and they have real-time where you are radar, so they can help you, in that standpoint. If you've got some sort of, any sort of issue, just ATC is a valuable resource, and utilize them, right? And like Trent was saying, that repetition will get you comfortable enough to talk to them, and so forth. And another point he made was, if you go on YouTube, right, and you're looking up ATC communication. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but a lot of it is to get views, I guess, or whatever. Like a lot of it, you're seeing the controllers like up in New York, or all of these very busy places like yelling at pilots and like all of this crazy screaming and whatever, right? Uh, and that certainly gets views, but like 99% of air traffic control are absolutely helpful and absolutely fantastic. Like you're going to get to meet the Birmingham controller, and like he is the most laid back, guy. I mean, it's fabulous. Now, everybody can have a bad day, right? They can be stressed. We can be stressed. There could be just a certain situation where their workload is so intense that they talk short, or they sound angry or whatever. uh but at the end of the day, like the majority of ATC is fantastic, right? I mean, have you ever had really any bad run-ins with ATC?
Uh, Not really. I mean, when I was a student, and this is the same, I won't name, obviously, not going to name, I won't even name an airport. But as a student pilot, I was going to do some tower landings, and I was obviously super green, like first time or second time talking to a
Hmm.
controller. And I had to ask him to repeat things a couple times, and he kind of raised his voice a little bit. But I mean, it was never, it never got personal or anything like
Yeah,
that. I could hear the frustration in his voice, but at the end of the day, he still, helped me out and stuff like that. But
yeah, and
um,
do that as
I
much
mean,
as you need. Yeah,
that's
yeah, you
literally the only time. I mean,
yeah, and you have to 100% clarify if you have any doubt. I mean, and that still happens with me. I mean, I've been talking to ATC for what, 20 years. So, but that still happens to where I'm like, did I hear that right? And I'll just key up and go, hey, did XYZ? I mean, you don't have to use, you read it in the AIM. You don't have to, they're not telling you to use proper phraseology. Like at the end of the day, let's effectively communicate. So just tell them what you want. The biggest thing that I see though is when ATC gives an instruction and they don't have a clue what the student or the pilot doesn't have a clue what they just said, they don't say anything. And that is the worst thing that you can do, because if you just don't say anything, then obviously they don't know if you received anything. There's got to be confirmation. So if you didn't hear a word that they said, when they get done, just immediately say, hey, say again, right? Just communicate, you didn't understand that. If you just don't say anything, then they're going to be like, well, did he hear me? He's got to make sure that you give that confirmation back. So then he'll say it again. But you can also say in that pilot controller glossary, it kind of talks about, like, say twice, or I forget the exact wordage is, but like, say it twice. Say the instruction 2 times. Some of this newer avionics, our audio panel has in our Cessna 172 has a play button where you can like play the latest transmission. Now that doesn't really work in everyday ATC because that would be kind of like not saying anything, right? If you don't understand it, just come back and go, say again. Just communicate until you're 100% sure, and write everything down. Have your knee pad there, have your iPad with a scratch pad. Just write it down now, but make sure that you know all you care about are the assignments. So like, ATC might give you advisory information. That's not important to read back. Don't worry about that. Like, they may say, all right, 651, you're clear to land runway 24, winds are 240 at 5, gusting to so and so, aircraft departing prior to your arrival. Well, the only thing that matters right there is you're clear to land. All the other stuff is advisory. Don't read that back. Just say clear to land runway 24. All right. So just the assignments, read that back. The other stuff, altimeter settings, um, winds, whatever, like, you don't have to read that back. Just read back the assignments. They tell you to fly a heading. They tell you to fly an altitude. They tell you to report 4-mile final. They tell you to whatever. Just read that back. You don't have to read back, the other stuff. But yeah, like you said, Trent, I think that's a great thing of like repetition. Just fly as much as you can in those class charters. Bring a CFI or an experienced controller too, right? Controller, other experienced pilot. Somebody like yourself, even though you're, up and coming CFI, but um, just get comfortable with that. Here on the student section, use that checklist. Put your own tel number in there. It's got blanks where you can literally fill it in, and you can make notes on the side. Just follow that until you get some repetition built in there. But um, we were talking this morning to Blake, talking about like the anxiety part of worrying about getting into trouble, right? Like, make sure and clarify it, right? uh we were talking about controllers that might get irritated, sure, but I'd whole lot more them get irritated than me to think or assume that the clearance was X, Y, and Z, and then I violate that clearance, right? uh, and then they're going to be even more irritated if I cause a traffic separation issue or something that causes him headache or whatever, right? um, so yeah, I think just a lot of people are just worried about getting into trouble, right? Call and verify if you're unsure. Don't assume, right? A lot of people don't want to sound stupid, right? um I, yeah Tell
Well,
me your.
especially as I mean, a student, and
Yeah.
you hear airline pilots and ATC. It's so fast, and
Yep.
they all sound so good on the radio, and it's almost embarrassing to
Yeah.
even talk as a student
Yeah.
because you're not going to sound like that or whatever. But
Right.
I mean, definitely don't let that intimidate you.
Yeah.
As hard as it might be.
Yeah. Exactly. Just be okay with sounding stupid. Be okay with not having an ego. Be okay with telling them a student pilot, even if you're not a student pilot. And just effectively communicate. And I look forward. Comment on the archive if you've got any questions for the air traffic controller. Today I just wanted to basically explain the aim, show you where the pilot glossary stuff is, show you where how we can kind of rock in through a class Charlie and class Delta, all on the website there, so that can kind of be some study material. But kind of wanted to just to more or less talk about it from a pilot's perspective, and then we can get in depth with the Birmingham controller. And I think that's going to be just a fantastic live video, and getting to kind of discuss to him, and show you guys that they're just human too, right? They're humans, right? So you're just talking to another human. Just effectively communicate, right? If you were sitting across the table from somebody and they told you to do something and you just stared at them and didn't say anything back to them, they're going to be like, what's your problem? Did you hear me? Did you understand what I was saying? Um, so just effectively communicate who you're talking to, who you are, where you are, what do you want, and then just acknowledge everything back to you. Acknowledge frequency changes, acknowledge altitudes, headings, all the other stuff, about winds and altimeter settings. You don't have to read that back. But that's really about all I had. You got really anything to add, Trent?
Not really, man. I think you covered it. Yeah,
Okay.
uh, don't be intimidated or
All right.
embarrassed because, I mean, they're there to help. They want to help you.
They are.
And I mean, you know, 20 hours or so talking to ATC, and it's going to be like, you know, second nature. I mean,
Yep.
you know what's coming, you know what to expect. Then you get to the point where, as far as VFR goes, I mean, not even having to write anything down, just
Yeah,
because you know what
exactly.
to expect. And I
Yeah.
mean, easy peasy.
Yeah, but it's okay learning to write it down. Use like this,
Oh,
these re,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
use these resources here to, and it walks you through everything you have. Chair flight the night before, using this stuff to go. All right, you can look at the terminal air forecast and determine what the winds are going to be. You know where you're going to be parked at the field. So just literally start from, I'm sitting in the airplane. I've done my pre-flight. I, start the airplane. I get all that stuff done. I start to set my radio. So I'm setting it to ATIS. I'm listening to that. I'm writing all those winds down. And then they tell me what runways are in use. Now remember, you can choose whatever runway you want. Um, even if it's not one of the runways in use, usually, at a place like Birmingham, they can't accommodate that. But, if you need something else for aircraft limitations or whatever, just talk to them. But, you know what runway, if they're using runway 24 and 18 and you want runway 24, then you just request. If they tell you taxi runway 18, you don't have to do that. You can say, hey, I'd like to use 24. And then you can pre-plan and know exactly, okay, I'm here. If I've got to go to 24, then this is how I would taxi. I use my iPad still to this day, and highlight it, but make sure you have an airport diagram up in front of your face or somewhere when you're taxiing. um, Worst case scenario, um, get a progressive taxi, but then you get up to the runway, you've done your run up or whatever, contact tower, let them know you're ready for takeoff, and then they give you permission to take off, and whatever. But just use these resources on the cofieldAviation.com website. And the big thing is here is just effectively communicate. ATC is just people, right? So I think that's about it. Trent, man, I appreciate you joining me tonight, talking
Oh, yeah.
talking ATCs. Do you have any other ATC stories?
No, I mean, nothing that sticks out really.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really about it, man.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate the insight, and some of the experiences that you've had with ATCs and ATC and helping with the student pilots. So everybody, I appreciate it. Comment in the comments there on the archive for any questions you would want to ask an actual controller, and I'll be sure to ask him. And some of the chat here, Mike Perry, appreciate you coming on. Yeah, I am flying with those guys, by the way. They're awesome. Love flying with them. Um, if only the IFR guys that would announce a 5 to 8 mile final had to enter the pattern. Yeah, in the jet, I always enter the pattern if it's VFR. I do. But in the AIM, it doesn't preclude that you can't do a straight in. If you're in the jet, sometimes risk management wise, we're better off to just do a straight in instead of maneuvering out in XYZ or sequencing for other traffic. It just makes more sense to do straight in or a base or something like that. But and the AIM doesn't necessarily prevent it, but state your intentions. But that doesn't give you priority to cut off the people in the pattern. And then I think he's talking about if you violate, we've got a phone number for you, possible altitude deviations. Thankfully, I've never had that happen. All right.
Yeah,
But
thankfully.
yeah, thankfully not. I don't have to call ATC and and tuck my tail and tell them what I did wrong. But if there is something that you do wrong or whatever, even if ATC doesn't give you a phone number, remember those NASA reports. Fill out a NASA report. Those are great information of just, hey, I screwed up. This is how I screwed up, and it's a get out of jail free card if there was to be any enforcement action on you, too. So just do a NASA report and move on if you have one of these altitude deviations. So, anyways, I think hour and a half is enough. Trent, appreciate it. Have a great night, and thanks everybody for watching. See you, buddy.